touch the ground. Different sheets on the same old me. Gotta wake up, don't lay down. You gotta wake up, don't lay down. Then you put it on the paper before me. Not in my head what I really mean, maybe. Just wanna see it on me watching little TV. Focus on the thunder in my head. Before I lose my man again. Before I lose my man again. Before I lose my man again. Before
Well, welcome. Today we're going to go over a little bit of a deck tech here. We're going to go over the big giant flying dragon monster called Prossh, the Sky Raider of Kirkeep. This is easily one of my favorite EDH decks that exist. I love me some dragons, and this just fills all the voids that I have. There's a lot of synergy with this bad boy here, so I'll try and hit as much of it as I possibly can. This is going to be deck tech number 2, coming out of the Dragon's Lairs. I'm excited about all the other deck techs we're going to be doing here later. We're probably going to get some other people in here too to get their deck techs, and we're just going to make this a pretty habitual thing, shall we say. With that being said, I did want to lay a little bit of ground rules here. Again, this is my own personal EDH deck. This is not a net deck type of deck. I kind of done my own little tweakings to this one, and then this is specifically for my own EDH group. This does not mean that this deck is not capable of being crossed into anyone else's EDH group, but there are certain criteria that have been made because of this. One is, again, our group doesn't do big mass land destructions, and we don't really like to take all the turns. Those are two things we try to stay away from. And then again, I set myself up for my own deck building designs and restrictions to where you probably won't see a lot of the same cards in a lot of my EDH decks. I try to limit them as much as possible, unless of course they're unnecessary for things like Soul Ring, Command Tower. I try not to have a lot of the same cards in each deck, so that at least that way there's a little bit of diversity and the ability to play different cards at all times. So my Prossh deck has a lot of sub themes to it. One of the biggest sub theme you're gonna find is there's a sacrifice sub theme to it. I try my best to try and use this Prossh ability to sacrifice things to get as much advantage out of it as I possibly can over much of the other typical like Prossh decks. You'll find that there's also a lot of sack outlets inside the deck as well, to be able to make everything kind of work and flow easily, even if Prossh isn't there on his own. So we'll kind of give a quick walk down through everything that's going on, and I'll try to explain every card and some of the neat interactions each cards have with each other as we walk our way through this wonderful EDH deck. I'm going to go ahead and start off with my lands. 37 of them. You'll find a lot of obvious ones in here. There's a lot of dual type lands. I've got Evolving Wilds and where are we at? There's a Terramorphic Expanse somewhere in here in the T's. Yeah, Terramorphic Expanse. These were chosen because I'm playing a lot of basics. You don't have to play a lot of basics. You can play your own big bad duels like Badlands and all of your fetches, and you can do that too. I just have not done it. That's not something I'm quite interested in. I'm very happy about my basic land base, along with the fact that some of these in here actually go fetch up a lot of basics. So I have no interest to go out and get the bad boys. So if you want to save yourself a couple $100, you can do it this way too. It works just fine. A couple of the utility lands in here, you're going to find a high market that lets you sacrifice a creature. Again, small sub sacrifice theme in the deck. And then you have Kirkeep, which lets you create more kobolds, because we just need all the kobolds. And then, of course, some more dual lands in here with your temples, swamps, stomping grounds, another temple, smoldering marshes. uh, Woodland Cemetery, Wooded Foothills, Verdant Catacombs, Terraform Expanse, and then your Temple of the False God. Another land that should probably be in here is going to be your Ancient Tomb, to be able to go from 4 to 6 very easily. And then if you want to, you run a very heavy blue play group, you can also play your Cavern of Souls to name dragons, especially if the deck has more dragons in it. Mine currently only has this Uno one, so we're not running around with a cavern as much. So the neat thing about Prossh also is, when we're talking about counters and blue players, is Prossh as a cast trigger and not a enters the battlefield trigger. So whenever you cast the spell, you get to create X1/1 red Cobalt creature tokens named Cobalts of Kirkeep, where X is the amount of mana that was spent to cast Prossh. So if you pay 6, you get to make 6 of them. If you pay 8, you get to make 8 of them. And if you paid 24, because for some reason Prossh died a lot, you get to make 24 Cobalts of Kirkeep. Of course, its dragon has flying, and then you get to sacrifice another creature, and then Prossh gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. Pretty neat trick, which means with commander damage, you get to be able to pump said Prossh up for a lot. And typically, Prossh is mostly a uh, 2-turn swing kill on his own when he's going after the same opponent, because of his sacrifice abilities. That also leads to another reason why you'll see that I don't have very many like mana rock effects, and I don't have very many um, spell-based ramp spells, because I want to have a sack theme going on, which means you're going to find a lot of the creatures instead of all the nature's lures, all the far seeks, and the cult fates, and all the other ones that go along with it. Of course, it's impossible to not have none of them. So I think we're playing about two of them in here. So we'll go ahead and start with our ones. We've got a Phyrexian Reclamation. It's a very neat card. It lets us revive a lot of our pretty big dummies here at the end of our curve. Especially even with the Ulamog trigger on the stack too. We get to bring that bad boy back, along with this one as well. It just lets us bring back all of our good stuff, and then we get to keep doing it over and over again. It gives us a little bit of a long game, which is very, very awesome. Especially after we start sacrificing things with Prossh. An easy turn could also be something along the lines of, like, you have Prossh in play, and you have an Avenger in play, and then let's say you could sack your Avenger of Zendikar, who's sitting over here, get Avenger back, and then recast Avenger and make all the 1/1s again, and then you can then just one-shot kill somebody with Prossh with commander damage, because you probably had 7 plus another 7, which is 14, plus the 2 Avengers, so you can pretty much do a one-shot kill almost with the Avenger on its own, along with the Prossh tokens that come with it. Um, You've got a Tragic Slip. We also obviously need some removal spells. Tragic Slip's pretty easily one of the best ones. It's kind of like the Swords of Plowshare for the deck. It's going to kill just about anything, no matter what, and there's really no drawback for you, because you're very likely going to have Morbid on. So this is basically 1 mana -13 almost at all times. Um, to be able just to kill indestructible creatures is pretty awesome. Instant speed removal is great. Helps stop all the combos that are going on. So that's pretty sweet. We've got 1 red Elemental Blast in the deck. This is let you counter a target blue spell or destroy target blue permanent. Uh, to be able to just laugh at all the blue players in my circle is absolutely hilarious. I would almost recommend playing this card even if you don't have a set commander table, because the very likelihood of you not running into one random blue player is very slim. So being able just to say no to your opponent who's trying to say no to you is great. I've used Red Element Blast on a lot of great things, killing creatures, countering their counter spells. It's great. Um, won't I've thought even about adding the Hydro Blast as well. Not the Hydro Blast, the Hydro one. I can't think of it. The Red Blast. Yeah, I thought about adding that as well to the deck, but then you run into scenarios where there is a potential that you don't have to face a blue player at all, and you have 2 dead cards in your deck. So 1 is the magic number for me, and I'll be sticking with the 1. Then you're gonna run into a Skull Clamp. Skull Clamp with Prossh tokens is literally just pay 1 mana, draw 2 cards, along with the fact that there is also this is one of your sack outlets, so you're able to use all of your fodder basically and turn it into cards, which is fantastic. Got to play Soul Ring. Being able to play Prossh on turn 5 is fantastic, if not even on turn 4, which makes it even better. Uh, so we get one of our payoffs here with Blood Artist. When we're talking about sacking things, you have to have Blood Artist in the grand scheme of things because this card just kind of lets you go off. It turns into this little fireball cannon thing that you're able to do when you start just taking everything down with all of your fodder. You also find that there is Sulaport Cutthroat, which does just about the same thing. It's each opponent instead of target player. So this one hits everybody, whereas Blood Artist only hits one of your opponents. Cutthroat, there we go. Is going to hit each of them, where this only hits one. Not too big of too much of a problem or difference. It's still both of them are very good. You may just have to kill more things to get them all out of the way with Blood Artist. But I will say, if you're able to get them both on the battlefield at the same time, you're probably doing really, really good. There's also another one in here sitting in the 4-drop. You're going to find your Falconwrath Noble. Another really good one there. Basically the same thing as Blood Artist, except it just has a bigger body with the flying ability on it. So, obviously you're going to have a Demonic Tutor. This is where I've decided to jam my Demonic Tutor. There's a lot of really neat things in here, a lot of good synergy, so being able to go find them all up helps a lot. So there's the Demonic Tutor for us. You'll find a Bloodghast in here. You're sitting here thinking, why is that Bloodghast in the deck? Bloodghast provides great fodder with not only Skull Clamp and all of the other sack outlets in the deck, and that's kind of why its main reason is here, um, is to be able to, especially if you kind of hoard up on some fetch lands, you're able to do quite a bit of damage with Prossh, maybe 2 to 3 sometimes, depending on how much you hoard up. But Bloodghast and Prossh play very well with each other, and they do really neat things. If you were probably wanting to change any card in the deck, it may be a Bloodghast. But I've decided to keep it for fun reasons, and it is here to stay. Then we hit Burning Wish. Burning Wish lets me choose a sorcery card from outside of the game. Reveal that card. Some playgroups don't allow this. Mine doesn't care, so I obviously have a Burning Wish package. Um, I will go ahead and give you a couple rundowns of a couple cards I have. Deathmark. It's a 1 black. Destroy target green or white creature. Decimate. 2 green red. Destroy target artifact, target creature, target enchantment, and target land. Blasphemous Act, 8 and a red. It costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. Deals 13 damage to each creature. Crux of Fate, it's a 5 mana field wipe, except you get to choose all dragons or destroy all non-dragon creatures. Sever the Bloodline to be able to get rid of those pesky indestructible creatures that you need to. It also takes a bunch of things with it, so it's really good against tokens. Primal Command, lets you gain lives, put non-creature permanents on top of their owner's library. Lets you shuffle graveyards as well, which is pretty sweet, and then lets you search. That's pretty. You can Burning Wish for a search for a creature card. Kind of turns Burning Wish into a really expensive tutor, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Vandal Blast just to ruin everyone else. It's fantastic. Ruinous Blast in case you need to get rid of planeswalkers or some pesky creature. Perish to be able to destroy all green creatures because that's very much fun. Oh, this insufferable thing, yes, Bennett, it is here. It is here. I am going over this bad boy. And then you're gonna find a Gaze of Granite. It's basically just destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less. And now that I've shuffled them all up, let's see if I can find cards I haven't picked out. And that chooses all of them. You can also do the new one that just came out here. Casualties of War is really strong. It's kind of like Decimate, just no drawbacks. So you can choose each individual one. That's a really neat one to have. You can obviously sub out any one of these particular cards for this Burning Wish, and then you don't have to play Burning Wish. So that's pretty neat. Let's see. Moving on down the line, Goblin Bombardment. Goblin Bombardment is another one of the cards in the deck that kind of lets you turn into this Blood Artist little Cutthroat deck. So it lets you do a lot of really, really, really neat things. Let's see. Bennett says, for anyone who's ever played against this, Ryan enjoys talking or taking all the fun at the table and waving it in your face as he engulfs it all. Yes, yes, this deck engulfs the whole table and just eats them all. And hopefully just sacrifices everyone down to it. Where are we? Goblin Bombardment. We were talking about that. So you just sacrifice a creature, it deals one damage or whatever it wants. It does, according to Bennett, neat things. Um, Being able to, if you need to, use your creatures as removal spells, or to be able just to, go off with it is very, very neat. And the next card is our another 2-mana enchantment, Cryptolith Rite. They're nothing better than being able to turn Prossh's tokens into mana. Turning every single one of Prossh's little Cobalt tokens into Llanowar Elves, or in this instance, Birds of Paradise, is fantastic. Having this on the board and then being able to untap with Prossh just means you're gonna have a lot of mana to do a lot of crazy things, which then lets you get to the R end curve, which is pretty huge. So it's very, very good card for this deck. Here you're going to find some more foddering cards. Dawntraitor Elk. This is chosen over anything of like the Signets or the Farseek cards because I want the sack outlet. I also want a dude for Prossh to be able to eat whenever he's ready. Prossh gets hungry at times, and you must have fodder for him to eat. Otherwise, you have not provided the Dragon Lord with his proper sacrifice, and he'll probably disdain you for the rest of the game. So you need to have your fodder, and this elk is good fodder. It's pretty neat that it also searches you. Another reason why we have a lot of basic lands is this card searches up basics. Nature's Lure, because it's a fantastic ramp card on 2. Again, we want to get Prossh out as soon as possible. Typically, when I play it, I'll probably put Prossh out the very moment I can, and then we'll just build the rest of our hand around what is happening with Prossh, whether he dies on 4, 5, or 6 whenever he gets cast. So it's a really neat to be able to ramp him out as soon as possible and get him out as fast as you can. Again, another fodder for Prossh if needed. Also, it's a ramp spell. That's why you're going to see a lot of the dorks in here are probably 1/1s to be able to skull clamp away or to be able to feed them off to Prossh later if need be, if you don't need the lands. Sylvan Library, fantastic EDH card. No joke. If you're playing green, you probably want to play Sylvan Library. Lets you draw cards, lets you filter everything green deck really wants, but can't always have. Um, Being that Bennett has already brought it up, I'll go ahead and bring it out for you guys. Food Chain is going to be the first 3-drop we talk about. Food Chain and Prossh actually just straight up combo out. Um, Food Chain says exile creature you control, and you get to add X mana of any one color, where X is 1 plus the exiled creature's converted mana cost. Spend this mana cost only to cast creature spells. So what this means is you'll cast Prossh, let's say for 6, and then you can make 6 Cobalt tokens, and you'll make Prossh. You have a Food Chain in play, you sack Prossh, you make 7 mana, and then you'll make 1 mana for each Cobalt token that you made. So you start netting mana, you start being able to produce a lot of casting Prossh over and over and over and over and over again, and as Bennett says, you just all die. For the most part, you can have an infinite amount of Cobalt tokens at its face value, um, or you can add a couple extra cards in here with it to be able to go crazy. We've already talked about the Blood Artist, Louisville Cutthroats, and the Goblin Bombardment. Those kind of are where you get to see the neat thing with Prossh and his sack ability and the go off, shall we say, and the all die table happens. Because with those out and infinite Cobalt tokens, you are then able to sacrifice them all to Prossh, and you'll get infinite Blood Artist, Louisville Cutthroats, or Goblin Bombardment triggers. Another card that also lets you do this is Goblin Sharpshooter. It is like Goblin Varmint 2.0. It's not great, but it does neat things. Um, and then it will lead into our other 3-mana card, since we're talking about Food Chain. Squee the Immortal. Squee the Immortal and Food Chain literally produce infinite mana. Because Squee produces 4 mana, and then gets exiled. Squee can be cast from exiled, so then every time you cast Squee, you're always going to net 1 mana. So you then get to produce infinite mana, which then lets you probably produce infinite Proshes. And then you get to do a lot of crazy different things, especially since Food Chain is already out. Um, Prossh. Prossh and his little infinite things are really, really fantastic. So moving on, we're going to go up to our Buried Alive up here. We'll hit this one. So this is a pretty neat card. There is a small graveyard package in here along with the ability to do just whatever you want. Again, we talked about how there's Phyrexian Reclamation over here. You can do a value Buried Alive, or you can just pick up a lot of giant monsters to be able to have in your hand. Buried Alive will let you go get any of your creatures you want, put 3 of them in your graveyard, and then shuffle your library. That's about it. Now the value Buried Alive is you get to put Anger, which is our 4-drop, which as long as we have a mountain, creatures you control have haste. Giving Prossh haste is great. There's nothing better than just having a very fasty Prossh. Um, and then along with Anger, you can go and get your Bloodghast. Of course, it comes right back. And then along with that, you can either put Squee the Immortal in the graveyard, because that can be cast from the graveyard, or you can go and get some of your value creatures here that you want to be able to Phyrexian Reclamation back if you ever need to. So it's a pretty neat to either have a value Buried Alive with those 3 creatures. That's basically turns Buried Alive into a draw 3. Um, or you can just get your value ones with Phyrexian Reclamation to be able to turn that into more creatures. Moving on from here, you're going to need a little bit of removal spell. It's amazing that I still have, friends that play DH. I do agree. Here's Downfall. Just destroy target creature planeswalker. Sometimes you just got to move things out of the way. This card does it, and it's going to hit just about anything that you need to move. And it's going to send your opponent down to a Downfall. Poor heroes. I guess that would make you the villain. What do you know? Phyrexian Arena, obviously, if there's anything more that you want in life, it's to draw all the cards. There's no blue in here, so we're going to find our ways to draw all the cards we can. Phyrexian Arena is our 3 mana. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose a life. It's great. It lets you hit the long game, lets you keep going. Sometimes Prossh can be a little grindy, especially if your opponents are prepared and ready for it all. So being able to keep up with all of your opponents is very strong. We talked about the Goblin Sharpshooter already. Basically, whenever a creature dies, whether it's yours or your opponent's, you get to untap this thing. And then if they got 1/1s, yeah, it just starts going crazy. If especially like I said, you just ping their 1/1, it untaps, and then you get to start pinging down all their 1/1s. It's very neat. When you start adding your own creatures into it, your ability to grind is very strong. Um, grind down all the creatures. I'm over here looking at Bennett talking about how the deck grinds. Yeah, Bennett says the deck grinds very well. Um, Moving on, you're going to find a little bit more ramp. Again, we talked about how important it is to get Prossh into play as soon as possible. And Awakening Zone is one of those ones that kind of feeds 2 different areas of Prossh. One, it's going to feed the ramp aspect. And then after the ramp is over, it gets to feed the fodder aspect by producing just random 1/1s out of the middle of nowhere. It's very neat to have this card in the deck because again, it fits both of the 2 modes and it lets you be like a sacrifice outlet for other things, whether it be Prossh or the other 2 cards that we'll hit later down on the line. The next card in the deck is probably one of the best cards in the deck, Beastmaster's Ascension. This card just lets you go off. You're probably going to kill an opponent every time this is played. No doubt about it, this card is one of the MVPs of the deck. It says whenever a creature you control attacks, you may put a quest counter on Beastmaster Ascension. As long as Beastmaster Ascension has 7 or more quest counters on it, creatures you control get to be +5/+5. With Prossh out, and you've just cast 6 Cobalt, you cast Prossh for 6, you get your 6 Cobalts. Now you have enough on just 1 attack with Beastmaster Ascension to turn all of your Cobalts into 5/5s. When you start adding this with all of the other token creating cards in the deck, it starts to get out of control really fast. And Beastmaster Ascension again is one of the MVPs of the deck, and it's probably going to kill the moment it comes down. You find a Cultivate here, gotta hit your land drops, gotta ramp. Fairhaven Elf is another one of those cards. 1/1 dies with a Skull Clamp, gets to draw cards. Also is fodder for Prossh and any of these other cards we'll get to here a little bit later. And then it ramps. No joke, this deck really wants to ramp. Fecundancy, which is another really sweet card. It says whenever one of your creatures die, or I guess a creature dies, they get to draw a card. That controller's creature, that is. So it's pretty neat to be able to, again, you want to grind a little bit, and you've got a lot of these fodder creatures that just lay around and just die for no apparent reason because you just want them to. So you'll be able to get to draw cards off of all the sacrificing that you'll be doing to keep the engine flowing and turning and turning and turning. We talked about Food Chain already. This is another sweet unit that just came out here lately. I'm not sure if everyone is able to see it. I'll go ahead and pop it up. It's Growing Rights of... I'm not even going to try and say it. Itlamok. Whatever. When it enters the battlefield, you get to look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of the library in any order. Now, this is not always going to hit in the deck. So this is not really the reasons why you're playing it, is to kind of just cantrip. It'll hit sometimes, but it's not always going to hit. What you're really playing it for is at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 more creatures, you get to transform this. And basically, this turns into a Gaia's Cradle. Afterwards, on the other side, it's the Cradle of the Sun. You either tap to add a green, or you get to tap and add a green for each creature you control. Now remember, Prossh makes creatures every time he comes in, so you get to make a bunch of mana. And when you start making a bunch of mana, you get to start doing a lot of stupid things with the deck. And again, I'll hit a lot of those here when we get towards the end. So mana, mana, mana. This deck is very mana hungry. It loves to use all of its mana. We're going to find a Primal Growth here. It's very neat. It comes with a sacrifice a creature effect and lets you get 2 lands for only 3 mana if you get a sacrifice creature. This is going to be one of those plus effects for having a sacrifice outlet. So this is one of those ones where you get to sacrifice your creature, use all the random fodder. Let's say you have your you cast, where are you? Your Fairhaven Elf or your Wood Elves, which is right here, which is basically the same thing as your Fairhaven Elf. And then your next turn you get to cast Primal Growth, sacrifice your Wood Elf. Now you've used your Wood Elf to find up 2 lands instead of 1. So Primal Growth is really great, and the neat thing about Primal Growth is that those lands come into play untapped. So you're able to turn your 3 mana spell into basically a 1 mana spell, depending on where you're at in the particular game. Next card is Song of Dryads. It's going to answer everything. You're able to put this on the commanders. They turn into forests. You can put this into enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers. Doesn't matter. Song of Dryads going to turn them all into forests. It just doesn't matter. Sometimes you just got to remove it all. It doesn't matter how you get rid of it, as long as it's gone. This card does literal everything you want. So we already talked about Wood Elves, and then we'll hit Eternal Witness. Again, Eternal Witness is just self-explanatory. It gets to bring back all your goodies. Nothing's better than just being able to cast your goodies over and over and over again. Neat thing with Eternal Witness and Phyrexian Reclamation is you do literally get to cast your things over and over and over again. We've got Yavimaya Dryad. Again, this is another one of those Wood Elves, Fairhaven Elf type card. It's an elf with a 2/1 ability that when it enters the battlefield, target player gets to get. You may search your library for a force card and put it on the battlefield tapped under target player's control. You're just going to target yourself and you're going to ramp with it. I don't see any reason why you would ever give your opponent another land in play, unless you just really need to get in 2 points of damage and have that forest walk going on with it. So that's pretty non-relevant. But being able to have a 2/1 is pretty neat. Also, it dies to the Skull Clamp. It produces a fodder for all of the other sweet cards, like we talked about with Food Chain and Primal Growth already. Those are a couple ones we mentioned already. I think the other ones were about to hit. Yeah, the other ones were about to hit pretty well too. So, Yavimaya Dryad is a great ramp creature for this deck. Next one is a new one from the new sets. So far, I've been very happy with the testing of this one. Domri, it's a 3 mana planeswalker. Creatures you control get +1/+0. What's better than turning your 0/1 kobolds into 1/1 kobolds? I can't think of much unless you're making them 5/5s from the Basemaster's Ascension. So this is just a static ability. You get to make your kobolds bigger, and then it's a ramp spell. I mean, I mentioned the deck was very mana hungry. Why not just add a planeswalker that lets you have your spells, helps you ramp your spells? Which the neat thing about this one also is that then it produces the ability to have all of your creature spells be uncounterable. So unaccountable Prossh on 5 is fantastic. Not to mention if you're able to do it on 4 with some other early spell that you've done here before. Followed by another sweet one that's just came out. You've got Rhythm of the Wild. Creature control can't be countered. Again, if you can make your Prossh uncounterable, it's great. If not, oh well. Another reason why we are this got more stuff. Yeah, so this got a lot more new stuff. Another reason why we're not really playing Cavern and we're choosing to play Domri and Rhythm, because now they all do flex. They flex a lot harder than the Cavern would because we've only got one dragon. So this lets Prossh be uncounterable this way, and it does other things. The neat thing about Rhythm is not only does it make it uncounterable, but it allows Prossh to have haste, which is again huge. The faster we get to kill our opponent, the better it is for us because we're more likely to win the game this way. So being able to give Prossh haste or ability to make it a 6/6 is relevant at times as well. Followed by our next up, we've got our 2 big sack outlets here. Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian's Altar. These are ramp spells in the artifact form, but in order to do so, you have to have fodder. Now, we talked about fodder already with all these random 1/1s laying around, all the tokens that are being made. These two cards eat everything that Prossh doesn't want to eat. So we'll start with the Phyrexian Altar. You get to sacrifice a creature, you get to add 1 mana of any color. This is fantastic. It's a little bit of fixing, a little bit of ramp, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Ashnod's Altar is the other one. They're both 3 mana artifacts, and they both ask you to sacrifice a creature. One produces any color mana, the other one produces 2 colorless mana. Now, the neat thing is, if you happen to have both of these out here at the same time, and then you cast Prossh, you are going to produce infinite mana. Um, each of the Cobalts will produce 2 mana, whereas then you can also use one of the Cobalts to produce the black, red, and green that is necessary for Prossh. So you'll make 7 creatures basically, and you'll be able to put 3 of them to make the 6 mana, and then you'll be able to use another 3 to make the colors. So you're eventually going to make infinite Cobalts. And an infinite sack outlet, again, if you happen to have a Blood Artist or a Zulport Cutthroat or a Falconwrath Noble in play. These two cards are fantastic for the deck. They all let you do a lot of different things, and of course, what's better than just randomly just killing your opponent out of the middle of nowhere. Moving on to the 4 slot, we've got the Falconwrath Noble, which we talked about. Another one of my favorite cards in additions to the deck, along with the Red Elemental Blast to be able to just take your blue players off guard, is the Snuff Out. Snuff Out is if you control a swamp, you may pay 4 life rather than pay this spell's mana cost to destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. I can't tell you the many times I've had my opponent try and Kiki Jiki, Zealous Conscript me, or Splinter Twid me, or go to Deadeye Navigate and start blinking, and I'm just like, gotcha, because they think I'm tapped out. But with Snuff Out, I get to basically snuff out their winning line and take victory away from them. Snuff Out is fantastic. I love this card a lot. It's got one of those get you cut cards where they think they're safe, but they're not really. So we're going to move on to our Grave Pact. This is our 4 mana, 1 black, black, black enchantment. This is one of those ones that kind of benefits us for playing a theme. You'll find another one of these at the 5-drop slot with Dictate of Erebos. This one has flash, but they both say the same thing. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Again, with all of these sack outlets and the sack fodder, we're able to basically control our opponent's board very, very well with these two out. It's almost impossible for our opponent to really get any advantage on us once we have a Prossh out in one of these two, because that's 6 creatures that each of our opponents have to sacrifice every single turn. And then with Prossh out and you've got your Kobolds laying around, you get to do this at instant speed whenever you feel like, whenever you determine it to be necessary. So these cards are pretty strong here with Prossh. They help you control the board very well, and they do really silly things at times. Followed by, we've talked about Anger. If you have a Mountain in your graveyard, it gives Prossh haste. What more do you want out of a card? It's very neat. There's a lot of times I'll just cast it on 4, swing it in with haste, and then I'll use it as a sack outlet for something else to put it in the graveyard to get it going. Here's another MVP of the deck. Purphoros, God of the Forge. Indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Purphoros isn't a creature. Followed by, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Purphoros deals 2 damage to each opponent. Purphoros also has the ability to pump. I can't really... Here we go. For 3 mana, creatures you control get +1/+0 until the end of turn. Now, we talked about how that was very important on the Domri, and how it was very important on the Beastmaster Ascension. Purphoros being able to do it for 4 mana is very sweet as well. It's also like a little added effect. But the real thing about Purphoros is if you have Purphoros on the battlefield, you cast a Prossh. Prossh is going to make 7 creatures entering into the battlefield just the first time it comes out. So therefore, Purphoros is going to deal 7 times 2. So 14 points of damage to each opponent just for Prossh coming out onto the battlefield. If you're able to do another round of Prossh, it's very likely your opponents are just going to fall under the weight of the Hammer of Purphoros, shall we say. And the game will be over in short order. This card is fantastic, MVP of the deck. So we talked about our Awakening Zone. Is very fitting that both these cards are sitting next to each other. This is our 4-mana Awakening Zone. Does literally the exact same thing, except it creates a 1/1 token instead of a 0/1 token. They both sacrifice for a colorless mana. The neat thing about this one particularly is it you get to pay a colorless and a green, and then you get to sacrifice this to search your library for an Eldrazi card. When we talked about how the end game was huge, well, this is a little sequel to how the end game gets huge. We get to start playing Eldrazi creatures. So when we gather all that mana up, sometimes we gotta have something to do with it. So we've decided to choose a couple Eldrazi creatures, both of them in the form of Uamogs. Uamog the Ceaseless Hunger, and then Uamog the Infinite Gyro. Um, so this one, when you cast it, you get to destroy a target permanent. It has Annihilator 4, and then when it goes into the graveyard in any form or fashion, you get to shuffle your graveyard back in. The other Ulamog is you get to exile 2 permanents, indestructible, and then when it attacks you, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of the library. Both of these are fantastic. They're like giant removal spells. They're very hard to get rid of, being that they're both indestructible. They're both giant. And I don't even talk about the times when you have so much mana that you're able to, let's say, cast one, sack one, Phyrexian Reclamation one back, and then cast it again. It turns into some crazy shenanigans. It's really just neat. The other we have in here is the It That Betrays. We talked about there being a sack theme. It That Betrays with Grave Pact and Dictate of Erebos is fantastic because once they start attacking their creatures, you get to then claim them all. It's very neat. I would not leave home without this bad boy in this particular deck. It does a lot of fantastic things. So we'll move on back to the 4-drop. We have a Parallel Lives here. Parallel Lives and Prossh are like best friends. Prossh makes your 6 tokens. Parallel Life says, no, no, no. Make 12 tokens, please. More sack fodder for Prossh, more sack fodder for Phyrexian Altar, Ashnod's Altar, all the other sacrifice outlets in the deck. Parallel Lives is fantastic in this deck. We're going to have a Pattern Rebirth followed up here. This one you get to enchant a creature, and then when enchanted creature dies, that creature's controller may search his library for a creature card. Then you get to put it straight onto the battlefield. My favorite thing to do with this is to put it on a Cobalt token, sacrifice it with Prossh, and put in either Avenger's Zendikar or Craterhoof Behemoth if I'm trying to win the game because I put in a lot of tokens and I get to overrun the board. Or if I'm just looking for value and trying to set up the rest of the game, we're going to talk about Mr. Razaketh, the Foul-Blooded. Basically, this is just Demonic Tutor on a creature in this deck because you have, again, we talked about so much sack fodder. This is another sack outlet to be able to go search your deck for whatever you want, and you'll be able to probably take down the game whenever you feel like. Using Pattern Rebirth to go get any one of these giant large creatures that we talked about here, whether it be even an Ulamox if you want to have some fun, or That Betrays if you're in a really neat spot with the Dictates of Erebos that we talked about. The Razencast to being able to Demonic Tutor for anything. Kratos Behemoth to win the game, or Avengers into card just to produce a lot more tokens is fantastic for this deck. Pattern Rebirth is like your Demonic Tutor, except it puts it straight into play. You don't even have to pay the mana for any of these fun things. We're going to hit a couple Planeswalkers here. We're going to talk about a little bit of, well, before we do that, we're going to hit the Solemn. Again, great card, sack outlet, ramps us, draws a card. Does everything this deck really wants. Can't fault this little robot guy, no matter how sad he may be. So we're going to move back into the Planeswalkers we talked about. We've got a Garruk here, 4-mana Garruk. This one creates fodder, ramps, and then produces the win game, the overrun basically ability for the most part of this deck. Being able to make your creatures turn into +3/+3 and gain trample into the end of the turn is fantastic. Those effects are perfect for this deck. This card just molds right into the deck design of this deck very, very well. Being able to ramp us, make more dudes, and then just kind of take over the game at the end with the overrun ability. Xenagos might be one of my most favorite Planeswalkers in this deck. Its plus ability is insane. Being able to add mana in any color combination of red or green, where X is the number of creatures you control. Let's just say you cast this on 4, cast Prossh on 5 or 6 or whatever, and then you get to make 7 mana, probably 8 from Xenagos. Just Xenagos uptick, because you put the 7 in from Prossh with the 6 tokens, and then the 1 that you probably made on its 0 ability where you created 2/2 Satyr. That's 8 mana from our 4 mana Planeswalker. Lets you do so many weird things, so many broken things with the deck. Being able to go and get all of your giant dummies and putting them into play, or just to use all of that mana to do other random things. Xenagos is by far one of my most favorite Planeswalkers and should be feared whenever it gets played. We're going to go up to the 5 mana Garruk. Nothing's better than drawing cards, and we want to grind at times, and this card does that. Prossh and Garrick are friends, especially when you get to start sacrificing creatures to Prossh to be able to then draw more cards because Prosh's power keeps getting bigger. Um, Garrick is fantastic. We're not gonna really worry about its ultimate because most of the time we're probably just going to draw cards all the time anyway with this one. So again, token fodder, which is what we love, and then the ability to draw more cards. Now Freyalise here is kind of fits along the line of a little more of a utility. It produces fodder, it produces ramp, and it has a little bit of the utility of destroying artifacts and enchantments. Not to mention the side effect of maybe even drawing cards. So again, that's kind of a little theme of ramping. We like to ramp with our creatures. Our planeswalkers like to ramp. The planeswalkers like to make more fodder. Our planeswalkers like to draw cards. Freyalise kind of fits all of this other thing, along with the ability of being able to get rid of artifacts and enchantments. There's not much of that going on in here in the deck, so Freyalise is kind of a small, important part of the deck. If you want to find a weakness in the deck, jamming artifacts and enchantments might be one of the weaknesses of this particular deck, and Freyalise is here to kind of help get through that a little bit. The next two cards, we're going to run into a little bit of inside combo where we're going to find the Kiki Jiki and then Zealous Conscripts, where they just so randomly happen to combo with each other. So we've got Kiki Jiki, which is a 5 mana, 2 red, 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 2/2 creature, legendary goblin that has haste. And when you tap it, you get to create a token that's a copy of target non legendary creature you control. It gains haste, and then you sacrifice it at the beginning of the end step. With Zealous Conscripts is the one you really want to target. Of course, you can also target some other random things as well, whether you want to make like more Fairhaven Elves to get more mana, or more random tokens to get into attacks, whether you want to create another Avengers Zendikar, or maybe even another Craterhoof if you want to. You can do all of those things with Kiki Chiki. Another neat one is making like another Goblin Sharpshooter, or if you need another Blood Artist to be able to just get lethal kills on some players because you need 2 sack outlets. Kiki Jiki lets you do that as well. But the big reason for Kiki Jiki is the Zealous Conscript's interaction. Zealous Conscript has haste. When Zealous Conscript enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent you control, or gain control of target permanent until the end of turn. Untap that permanent, it gains haste until the end of turn. So what the neat thing is Kiki Jiki untaps or taps to make another Zealous Conscript. Zealous Conscripts then untaps Kiki Jiki, and back and forth, back and forth. So you'll hit this, tap Kiki Jiki to make a Zealous Conscript. Zealous Conscript enters, untaps Kiki Jiki, and we just keep doing down the line until there's lots and lots and lots of Zealous Conscripts. To which then you can also use them as sack outlets. uh, so moving on, we're going to hit our Sidisi. It's just basically our 5 mana Demonic Tutor with a body. The fact that it has a body is huge because, again, it produces another wonderful fodder for all of the great things that we have going on. So when Sidisi enters the battlefield, you get to exploit. If you do get exploit, you get to search your library for any card you want and you get to put it in your hand. The exploit is basically when it enters, you have to sacrifice a creature. So not only is CDC one of the sack outlets, it also produces great sack fodder later at times, but the sack outlet of being able to demonic tutor for a creature is fantastic. Um, wouldn't sleeve up the deck without this bad boy. So we've talked about all of our big dummies of Ulamog, Hit That Betrays, Razaketh, Craterhoof Behemoth, and Avengers Zendikar. That's going to leave us with 2 sweet cards left over, both green. We're going to talk about the Tooth and Nail. It is our, I'll go ahead and pop this up bigger for everybody. It is our 7 mana Tooth and Nail sorcery. You get to choose one, search your library for up to 2 creature cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Or you get to put up to 2 creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Of course, it has the Entwine ability to be able to pay 2, so now you're paying 9 mana, and you're able to search your library up and then put 2 creatures on the battlefield that you want. You get to do both. This deck being able to have 2 different creatures is 2 different type of creatures is huge, and you're able to do a lot of weird interactions. Let's just say the world is kind of your oyster at this point. If you Tooth and Nail and you can go get like Perforos and Avengers Zendikar, you're probably going to do a lot of damage. Or if you just really feel like ending the game at this point, you can go get Kiki Jiki and Zealous Conscripts. That also lets you get kind of the missing pieces you might be needing if you're ready just to kind of go off and kill people with a sack outlet, but you're missing the payoff for the sack outlet. So it lets you go get a blood artist if you really need to, and you really get to go get both of them if you really want. Tooth of the Nail is a pivotal uh, card for the deck. It lets you turn the corner a lot of times if you really need to go get just random things. You can go get Ulamog and hit that betrays and put them both on the battlefield if you're really far behind, or being able to get an Avengers Zendikar at any point for the creator of Behemoth is great, especially if you have anger in your graveyard. The other card I want to talk about is a fantastic EDH card, Seasons Past, one of my favorites. This card is your 6 mana grind the hell out of everybody card here. This card lets you return any number of cards with different converted mana cost from your graveyard to your hand. Put Seasons Past on the bottom of your library. The neat thing about Seasons Past is it lets you go get a 0 drop, a 1 drop, a 2 drop, a 3 drop, a 4 drop, a 5 drop, a 6 drop, a 7 drop, and if you're ever feeling like it, a 10 and an 11 drop if they're ever in your graveyard at any particular point, which may be hard because the 11 drop isn't really in there for very long. Um, but the really neat interaction is with Season Pass going back on the bottom of your graveyard, it is not in your graveyard. So if you're able to use one of your 2 drops to be either Sidisi or Demonic Tutor, you have now basically illustrated a small little loop that you get to do every turn, and you'll get to grind your opponent out this way by replaying every single card that you get to cast every turn. Because your Seasons Pass will pick up your Demonic Tutor, and your Demonic Tutor will go search the bottom of your library for the Seasons Pass, where it so thankfully put itself. Um, it's a very, very great card for the deck. If I was playing green, I probably would not play Seasons Past. Yeah, yeah, I would not play the deck without Seasons Past. Well, this has been a really, really interesting deck. I love, love, love Prossh. If anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'll definitely answer them. And as far as like Bennett throwing salt on me, he doesn't really understand. I don't think he understands why I like this deck. He can't fathom it. I don't know. He even asked me why I am this way, to which I don't know. It's great. You'll have to try it. Living the Prossh life is fantastic. Maybe one day you can be salty too, more than you already are. To which then, if any more questions would like to be thrown out, I'll be definitely glad to answer them. For you YouTubers, feel free to drop any questions or comments down below. I would love to answer them. Um, but this has been Prossh. Again, I'll come back again with another one. I plan on doing every single one of my EDH decks. There's like 12 of them. So they'll be all coming around here real soon. I'm pretty excited about that. Again, Bennett keeps asking me why I am this way. Great question, Bennett. Great question. Um, So with that said, for people that have been looking for it, here it is. Again, I'll have some more. Feel free to tune in. I've got awesome videos, great content coming on through Twitch. Some fantastic, like I was saying, some fantastic videos coming in through YouTube. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, or go ahead and like it on Twitch. Hit that little heart at the top. I definitely appreciate both of those gestures. Um, but with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the Prossh EDH deck tech. Again, this is my own personal deck with its own little, you know, twists and turns, because of just basically the criteria that I placed upon myself as far as deck building, and that our play group has. To which, just in case you were just wondering, I'm going to go ahead and re-list here. I don't like to play a lot of the same cards in my deck, so you'll probably only find specific ones in this one that you won't find in other ones. For instance, I'm probably not playing Kiki Jiki in any other my EDH decks. This is its home. This is where it lives. So I've chosen other different cards, which may be answering some of your questions of why haven't you chosen this card for this particular deck. That is it, because it's probably in one of my other decks. Again, the playgroup doesn't like taking turns, nor does it like mass destructions, land spells, so we try to avoid those as a whole. There's no reasons why they're not in there. But this has been great. I appreciate everyone that is here watching, and for all those that watch on YouTube, you guys are fantastic. I'll see you guys soon.